good. I'm glad you feel that way about it. I'm just going across the top. I see Arlene Schwimmer. Can you hear me, Arlene? Okay. If you don't, we know that you're pink, not red, or you're red, not pink, but that's okay.
Yes.
Both colors are welcome here. Okay, Marina, you're up.
Thank you so much for recommending this film. For me, it really was it was talking to me directly.
Oh.
I grew up in the family of a communist. I grew up believing in these ideas and respecting Lenin. And I was sad when the fantasy or the utopia didn't prove workable or livable. And when turns out that to make it work, you have to kill a lot of people or suppress any freedom of expression, because you cannot control, well, what people say and what they believe. I was in Mexico City this March, and I heard the story of Diego Rivera's mural, and they were very proud. Well, they are very proud of Diego Rivera. They were proud that Rockefeller wanted to commission his painting. It is copied. A copy of this is in Palace of Fine Arts in Mexico City, and tourists are introduced to the details and hear the story, how the Igor is surprised. What are you surprised about? It's my film society. Oh, my husband got shocked of what I am saying and came to check whether I'm in my right mind.
So tell us, Marina.
Yes.
How old were you when you realized that the system wasn't working or serving the people it was governing?
I was a teenager.
Okay, and you came here to this country then with your parents?
No, I came to this country when I was 38. My mother hated Stalin, but I grew up in the house of my grandparents. My grandfather was a professor at the university, and he taught the history of the Communist Party. My grandfather lost eyes in the battle under Odessa during Second World War. He was injured and he became blind, and still he learned to read Braille, and he learned to work and teach while being blind. But when I learned to read, I was reading for him his materials, preparing for his classes. So I know by heart a lot of the theory and a lot of Lenin's works, and I just grew up in it. And later on, when Khrushchev, when Khrushchev was opening up the crimes committed by Stalin and his KGB, I was asking questions to my grandfather, who was a historian, and he would say the idea was good. How could it be? Well, his Igor is telling me, tell them how your grandfather, he was demoted a couple of times because of his adherence to the ideal, not to party line. Anytime he would go to work, my grandma would tell him, "Don't speak up. Don't tell them what you actually think." Igor, do you want to participate? I was on the on with my earphones, but I'll let my husband hear what we're saying, because he's shocked with my ears, Igor.
Well, Igor.
Yeah. Right. So my grandfather would he would listen to BBC and Voice of America.
He was blind. He was awarded a special radio, what is called.
He could get the shortwave radio and listened to the foreign stations that were muted, but he could listen, and he and his friends, philosophers, historians, would discuss it all. In our home, they disavowed what was going on, but I was taught from my very young years never to speak up, never to tell anyone what people are saying in our home, because before Stalin died, my grandparents were supposed to be sent to Siberia. They were expecting to be arrested day to day. They told my mother, who was a student, where to go. They took their warm clothes to friends, so their friends could send the warm clothes to them. It's another novel.
Yeah.
But they believed in the communist ideals, like people who believe in Christ, believe in universal love. Like so it's their beliefs, and they lived according to their beliefs. The reality did not correspond to their beliefs, and that's sad.
No, it sounds very much like the age we're living in now. I'd like to move on to Betty and get your thoughts on the movie.
I enjoyed the movie. I guess I was saying earlier, there were so many characters in it. It took me a while to figure out who was who, and to keep it all straight. One thing I wondered about was there was so much about communism, about fascism, the House Un-American Activities Committee. I wasn't sure if they were just trying to show a picture of the times, or if there was supposed to be a message that they were trying to give us.
Okay, we're going to come back to that, because that's a really great observation, and we have an answer for you. The film has an answer for you. You may have missed it. Martha?
I overall enjoyed it. It was a little frenetic at times,
yes,
but cast was fabulous. I loved that it was all these characters who I knew, I mean, as people, Rockefeller and the actors, and John Houseman, who I guess I wasn't aware of till he was an old man, but all the different actual people. That was great. I had never heard of this movie or this going on, so I actually did a little reading on the side to see what it was about. My favorite part, I think, or my favorite scenes, was the end when they were destroying the mural and they kept intercutting, going back and forth to what was going on with the play and the destruction of that mural. But overall I liked it. I'm glad I watched it. Thank you for recommending it. I probably would have never found it on my own.
I actually saw it several years ago, and I considered it, and for some reason, I didn't pursue it. And then in searching for movies in the last month, I stumbled on it again, and I saw it, and I said, wow, this is really a great film. We should see this. So that's how it came to pass for us. David, what's your take on the film?
Well, one, it was, I will say, a little confusing. I knew a little bit about the theater project before this, and the thing that just comes to my mind when I think of seeing the film is it was awful loud. There was a lot of screaming going on in the film, and it was giving, I think, a little bit of a picture of the time and also the paranoia that was running around and everybody, in the midst of the depression. One of my questions is how did they get all of these actors signed onto this film? Because it was like every single person just
Yeah.
about. I looked over there and I said, wait a minute, that's John Turturro.
Yeah.
That's Joan Cusack. And I forgot that Houseman. When I was looking at him, I said, I know that guy. And then I saw it was Carrie Ellis. And
Yeah.
I was going, wow. I mean, they just had Paul Giamatti. They just had this long list of actors in there. I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised, but very surprised about.
Well, if you get a couple people on board, then the others say, "Wow, I'd like to work with him. I think it's a great idea." They read the script, and they may have it may have been shot in a very few days, which is why he may have selected the style. I think he selected the style for another reason, to shoot it quickly. But let's keep talking about it. Risa, Comrade Risa, what are your red values that apply to this picture in your red t-shirt? You're muted.
It's muted.
I grew up in a family where the underlying current was always my mother was a card-carrying communist. Now, I don't know if she was or she wasn't. She certainly was a very strong socialist. But Stanley used to say that, and still says, that she was definitely a communist, but she loved her mink coat.
Oh, so she was a New York communist, New York socialist.
Was a Bostonian communist.
Oh, even better.
But she also stood on the corners in Chicago and was firmly for the unions.
Uh-huh.
This was quite a contrast for me. I was very frustrated because I recognized so many faces and couldn't put a name on them. And I knew they were famous, and I knew I should know them, and I just couldn't name them, but I certainly knew I knew them all, and it was confusing.
Right.
And I kept feeling like I was missing the message, and then suddenly it would come clear to me. And some of the ideology I know from Israel, because there are kibbutzim even still today that are perfectly happy to celebrate the famous communist birthdays. And some of my cousins are Stanley's cousins. They're not mine, they're his. Are communists today, but they wouldn't say it. And it's in the culture. It's in the culture, the socialism that's at the base of Israel that in the early days was communist, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, you consider the earliest emigres to Israel came from, Russia, Germany, the Central European republics.
And of course, today, the Russian party are I won't say they're communist, but they're not uncommunist, if you will. The thing very Russian.
Yeah, and they're not very Jewish, because when they grew up, I'm talking about the emigres since 1970, not whose grandparents were born there. But those emigres grew up without any religion because it was discouraged by the state. And so they're apolitical. Well, they're not apolitical, but they're irreligious.
They're very political, and they love Mother Russia right through to today.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though,
in the 70s and 80s, who were teaching in the underground, and they were learning Hebrew and about the holidays
for the first time,
anxiously learning in those years. And Stanley was part of the group that was smuggling goods into them
Mhm.
and trying to get them to Israel. So it's a mixed bag. I thought the ending, that last
No,
scene.
no, 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 don't go there. Sorry to steal your thunder. It's a
Anyway,
not comedy.
anyway,
Not comedy.
well, I have to leave early today, so
Oh,
I just want to say that I loved it.
okay, great, great. Vern, how about you? What are your thoughts?
I can't say that I loved it. I spent, and I almost didn't watch it because I spent the first part quite some time with no clue who anybody was, trying to, and I couldn't leave it alone and just look at the story. I wanted to figure out who everybody was, and I'm looking it up at the same time. And I just got kind of lost in it, and then I'm losing the trail of what the story is, and I just said, I'm not watching this. And then, whatever, about an hour and a half ago, I said, I'm gonna go watch it. And I did, and I wound up liking it. I figured out who everybody was, and I could see by the end what they were, kind of who the various, there were, I thought, three stories going on more or less at the same time. And I
Mhm.
thought that was clever and interesting. I understood sort of what everybody, I thought it would have been a better movie if we didn't have, you had to know what was going on to really get the movie. You had to have a lot of knowledge about it to really get it. And you needed a playbook.
Yeah, I can see why most of you feel that way.
And
Me-
but I liked it. But I did
okay,
like it. It's certainly, as a movie, I mean, it was quite as somebody said, the acting was very good. The production was very good. And I'm glad to have seen it.
Mhm. Arlene, do you want to comment on that?
We
Okay.
lost Arlene.
Yeah, if you have any thoughts, we'll gladly hear them. You don't have to come on camera. Okay, well, we can hear you. You just speak up when you can. You're unmuted now. Joel, Jasmine, do you have any comments? No. Okay, let me explain the stylistic choice of this film. It's a lot of it's very chaotic, especially in the beginning. And that's why many people had a hard time following who was who. Yes, I'd seen it before, so it was easier for me. But you have to,
Jim,
yes.
I had one thought of the elementary part. We talked about that because, in a way, that was funny and yet very tragic,
Mhm.
and very sad at the end. So, and I felt it was a little confusing.
Mhm.
So, when you get a chance to talk about that, thank you.
Yes, we will. Joel, what are your thoughts?
Well, who and I had discussed that situation is, or so because a couple other people expressed that it's a little confusing and sometimes hard to follow.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
such a wonderful cast that it was very compelling to watch it.
Yep.
and we had discussed that we had the same thing about the Bill Murray issue, you know, what that was trying to convey at the end.
Okay. Well, we'll kick that around for a while. I think having seen it 3 times, there's one theme that comes up all the time is that everybody's a prostitute. We all sell our souls for something. Everybody has their price, both the left and the right. People on the Dice Commission and people like Bill Murray and Hazel Huffman. That's Joan Cusack, who are the right wingers who fall apart under the pressure of the movement, and then the lefty artist types. And even they have their price because many of them said, "Oh, the union doesn't want us to go. We're done. I got to work again. I need a job."
Why didn't the union want them to go?
I don't know.
Me neither.
Historically, that I don't know, but the union supported the government.
Didn't
And-
make any sense. That was very troubling, and I was distracted, and it distorted. I couldn't understand the theme given the union. I kept saying, which side is everybody on?
Right. I can't defend it. I can see why it was confusing. I just said there's a new villain in town, and it's the union. It's not the government. But this whole film is an argument about being true to yourself or selling out. Right? Every scene, not every scene, but as you get deeper into the movie, this comes up time and time again. Emma Watson plays a prostitute in the play within the movie, right? And she ultimately shows what she's made of by not selling out and standing up and singing at the very end. She's the first one. Now, her boyfriend sold out, so he's no longer her boyfriend. Yes, he left her, but it's like she's done with she, it would never have worked out anyway. He was too handsome and too uncaring, Never trust guys like that. All show and no go. But this whole film is a dialectic about art versus freedom of expression and controlling government. It's really, that's the main theme of it, and how we all participate in that kind. We can all be tempted for that kind of moral corruption. That said, there's a lot of detail in here that had to be told. And that is told by all the players. There's so many voices, but if you look at those scenes with the moving camera backstage among all the players, everybody, people have one line and then they move to the next character who has another line that actually follows if the same person had said it. So the film is written like a speech or a dialectic argument, right? And they just broke it up to make it interesting so more people could have a chance to speak in it. And it's very fluid to make sure that we see everybody when they say things. This contrasts to Robert Altman had a style for a number of years of having multiple layers of conversation in scenes. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, notably, and a couple of other films that I think did nothing for the plot of the storytelling. This film does, because it's all about the story and the political issues at stake here, and people's reaction to them. Now you'll notice that the Bill Murray and the Joan Cusack duo, are alienated from the rest of the group. She's on a culture war. It's very familiar to us today in this time, where the arch conservatives see nothing but bad and want to return to the old good American values of family and patriotism. Of course, to us today, patriotism is many things to many people. Instead of just being only two things to the two groups, if you say they're the polar opposites of the acting troupe. But you see what's important to the actors. There's this couple who's making love all the time in the theater, and that's sort of a symbol of the free-spiritedness of the troupe. And then there's the Mathers. That's Vanessa Redgrave and her husband, John Philip something, Michael Philip something, and they're the wealthy. He's the bigwig who's doing business with Mussolini and his emissary, played by Tim Robbins' ex-wife, Susan Sarandon, who's wonderful. The ex-Jew who slept with Mussolini, but she's done with that now. and then, because she's having an argument with Diego Rivera, who takes money as well, but she says, I'm done with that. And he says, yeah, but you still, work as a salesman for this awful man. And he stays true to his word. He won't change his painting. He's true to his art. So he's the pinnacle of moral purity, even though Joan Cusack thinks she is. And this is the problem with culture wars. Everybody thinks they're absolutely right, and there's no gray in between. And of course, this leads people to extreme positions and extreme exclusions of others, today especially. But I wanted you to notice that this film takes place in 1936, where the rabid fear of communism was very much alive post-war. There were people who hated FDR and the New Deal because they felt it was socialistic, right? Like Trump is always calling people socialists. It's a dirty word. Of course, democratic socialism today is just liberal democracy, but the misnomer sticks because it's has a bad feeling attached to it for many people. But this feeling before World War II was exacerbated by the war itself, when Russia, our ally in helping defeat Hitler, and they were so instrumental in doing so and lost millions of lives. The Cold War happened and we became other enemies. So, it was strange bedfellows for the duration of the war. We all needed each other, but it was clear that there was no trust or love lost in the Cold War. So this country became very anti-communist. The John Birch Society flourished after World War II. That was an arch-conservative, strict constructionist kind of group. And there were even anti-union arguments going on I can remember in 5th grade having a debate about should we support unions or not. And that was back in, so I was what? I was 10, so 1958. It was after the HUAC Committee on Un-American Activities and all the red baiting and the entertainment people that were brought in to testify. But again, this is the same thing. The artists are called communists and outsiders and working against the common good. And they're saying, no, I'm not against the common good, and I'm not a communist. Just like Cherry Jones, the Miss with an Irish name, I forget her name, not Fitzpatrick, but with a hat, Cherry Jones. She says, no, I've never been a communist. Well, who's this guy, Marlowe, Christopher Marlowe? I mean, that's a very funny part of the film. It doesn't, you have to know Christopher Marlowe is, but he's a 15th century writer. And then they get into this whole absurd discussion about, oh, they're communists way back to the Greeks. Weren't they all communists? It's like, so this is a knee-jerk reaction of people who cannot take nuance into their thinking. Then and in 36 and in 1950s with the investigation of Arthur Miller and Elia Kazan. Does everybody know the Elia Kazan story? And let me share it with you. It's very interesting. Elia Kazan did East of Eden and other great films, director, and he was called before the committee because he was accused of being a communist. And they asked him to name names. And most of the other show business personalities, including a group called the Hollywood 10, refused to name names, and they were blacklisted mostly for the rest of their lives. Ring Lardner was one. Joe Losey was another. Losey left on his own accord. Bertolt Brecht was called before the committee. And, there's an appearance, a vision of Bertolt Brecht behind Blitzstein, challenging him about what are you really doing here? And that's a recurring motif in the film. I enjoyed it. I could have dispensed with it. But it was nice to see Hank Azaria in scenes. Dalton Trumbo, thank you,
Yes.
Marina. And I think even Ring Lardner, who wasn't known as a film a screenwriter, but was a novelist and very well known at the time. He was called up, and these people's careers were damaged by Joe McCarthy, who turned out to be a savage alcoholic and was debunked by Edward Murrow. That's a fun film to watch with George Clooney playing Edward R. Murrow, nailing the coffin of him because he challenges him. The Have You No Shame came from a congressman who in Congress confronted McCarthy and said, have you no shame? You're destroying these people's lives. And that was the end of it, the beginning of the end for McCarthy. But the actual interview with Edward R. Murrow is really something to watch. You see McCarthy squirm under the questions because ultimately he knew he was just playing a political game. He was playing the culture wars back in 1951. And so this has always been with us. And today it's worse than it ever was. During the Vietnam era, the hawks for Vietnam were anti-communist because they thought, as Kennedy and McNamara, the defense secretary, said, there's the domino theory that Vietnam will fall and Russia's influence will spread all over Asia. And eventually, McCarthy went public and he said, we were wrong. And there's a film about that too called The Fog of War by Errol Morris, where McNamara admits, we were wrong. We thought it was a threat to the whole world, and it wasn't at all, that Vietnam was communist. And we lost all those American lives in that war. And it was a disgrace, and it should never have happened. But people who supported the war were on an anti-communist binge as well, because they were afraid of the same thing. And there was no one there to dissuade them of, I mean, there was certainly a movement on the left and a student movement. It happened to coincide with the civil rights movement in the 60s. And that was, an incredible changing period for us. But those were the forces fighting the civil rights movement, as well as fighting the anti-war movement. And again, we had a brief period of respite from that. And lo and behold, we have Trump calling Kamala Harris a socialist.
No,
no,
a Marxist.
A Marxist. Oh, that's even worse, because that means she's purer. And but that's just, you see, it becomes more meaningless. The more you repeat a lie, the more meaningless it gets, unless you take the Kool-Aid and you actually champion it and believe it. But we don't have to talk about contemporary politics, but the culture wars have been with us forever. That's my point. And this film is just a blow up of one period before World War II, where in FDR's attempt to help the economy recover and put people back to work, including artists, he reached out, and lo and behold, some of the artists were gay, and some of the artists dated Negroes, and some were socialistic or communist even, so they all were. And thinking got clouded, and opportunists like the Senator Dyes ran with it. And it's just like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and all the other supposed do-gooders just support the worst distortions of history and current social forces to their own benefits. So, but let's get back to the movie, because that's really what it's about, was taking this period of time, 1936, and stating almost in an argumentative format what all these positions were. And it takes a lot of characters to carry that mail, or it would have been very dull if it were just a 6-person play, because it's static. But here you have this volatile theater company where even the two heads of it, Houseman, who was gay, and Orson Welles, who was very volatile, yet they were partners in the Mercury Playhouse, or Mercury Players. They fought. I mean, there were the divisions among that big cohort of performers. And, there was John Turturro's own family situation, where his relatives fought him. He didn't want them singing Italian songs, fascist songs, in his own house. So he leaves. He moves out of the family household and sleeps in one bed with his whole family, or two beds. That's how pure an artist he was. And it's not that he was a pure artist, but that he just didn't like Stalin and the Stalinists, and he was being accused of being a Stalinist, but he didn't like the fascists in Italy who were rising at the time. Remember, this is the 36. And his Italian family was still so attached to the homeland. Remember, they said, if you malign Italy, you malign your own mother. It's like, talk about atavistic, paternalistic nonsense. It's like, it's terrible. It's very fundamental. And the misdeeds and the disgraceful behavior they wore it on their sleeves, because they didn't think it was disgraceful behavior, but we certainly see it as that today. So back to the style of the movie, which was confusing in the beginning for many, and that is the thread of a scene announcing a problem in the theater company was handed off from one player to a set of other players to a set of other players, ultimately winding back up with Orson Welles and John Houseman, or Emma Watson and the man who pursued her. These decisions came back to bite them, but they had to be articulated by many people at the same time to keep it active. And maybe it didn't hold all of your interests in the beginning for the first hour even, But eventually you catch up to it and you understand this is all about, does the government have a right to suppress free speech? And like the Dice Commission challenged Cherry Jones. So if a good play advocated for the overthrow of government, you'd let it go on, you'd produce it. And she said, no, I wouldn't. That's hyperbolic. It's an exaggeration of one small part of a problem into being the whole problem. No, that's not the point. She'd never advocate for the overthrow of the American government. They were trying to make it an either or proposition, as many people do today. And those of us who are intelligent and watch movies and analyze them and our reactions know the world's a lot more nuanced than that. And no, this kind of behavior doesn't play very well for us. So what you saw was the narrative style of this was necessitated by the amount of political polemics, the political argument that was a necessary part of telling the story. She had to go to Washington to be interrogated and humiliated by the panel. Bill Murray and Joan Cusack had to made to feel like outcasts, like her office shuns her. She was giving out work slips. And they were all good, solid lefties trying to help out of work people. And she was rampaging against the artists because they were infiltrating the country and polluting it. And then I want to talk about the wealthy people, the John Cusack, the Rockefeller is kind of a funny role. And he's trying to subvert Rivera because he says, oh, this would be great if we could get this foremost artist. And I know a lot about modern art, like it sounds like a Trump claim. And he's a great artist and I want him for my lobby, and he doesn't realize the kind of political currency that Rivera would bring to such a big public forum. And he doesn't like it. So he asks Susan Sarandon to intervene. And she goes and she says to him, he wants it to be nicer. And Rivera laughs. So they have a laugh together. This woman is an operative for the Italians. She's just a Machiavel. She does whatever's best for her. And she's like a dance man for Mussolini. She's making the deals. She went there to get Gray Mathers, the head of the steel company, to agree to provide them with truck parts, the frames for trucks, to help support Mussolini's political development in the late 60s. And you'll notice there were two satchels of money that were exchanged. One from the guy in red, who looked like a cardinal, and he dressed up at this is very telling, he dressed up at the masquerade party as a religious cardinal in the Vatican. Right. And he says, well, listen, we're wealthy. We can control the arts by controlling the artists. They're all whores anyway. We'll just pay them enough money to not get political. And we'll have all these things, we'll have landscapes and historical things and this and that. And they'll paint safe subjects. And of course, the last subject that Mr. Mather says, and they'll do nudes too, which it's a funny line. They're trying to assume this dignified and clean, upstanding art theory or, sense of what art is. And then, of course, they go for the salacious for personal satisfaction. That's a hilarious line. And then they cut out of the scene. And of course, that all the characters are in these ridiculous costumes for the, yes, the dummy was Marina. The dummy was singing the Internationale. That's a very interesting scene. So let's come back to it. But the wealthy are very interesting because they're constantly trying to subvert and enslave or get the artists in tow. And they can't do it with his acting company. They couldn't get it with Diego Rivera, who was already a rich man because he was so successful. He calls Susan Sarandon what is he saying in my notes? I have it somewhere. It's a very funny line. You're a Jewish mouthpiece for Mussolini. And she says, and you're a wealthy communist. It's like name calling. It's like they pick these polar opposites, two descriptors for each of them, and they managed to twist it around. And yes, he was a wealthy communist, but he was pure. He had enough money not to be subverted. She liked the attention and the power and the glory, and not just money.
He was Jewish. That's what he
She
said.
was Jewish. Well,
You're-
look at Stephen Miller, who's Trump's head of deportation. His
Right.
parents were socialists
Yeah.
in Santa Monica. So is this a child rebelling against his parents? Yes, absolutely. He's got some axe to grind. He's a horrible person, and the policies that he dreams up are just cruel and illegal. Yet he tries to mainstream them through the MAGA movement, and there are others like that. And it's there is no end to the depravity and the moral corruption of human beings, left and right. There's no end to it. And this is something we have to accept and guard against by voting. But who knows if that's going to happen here. But that's what you can do in a democracy, is you can slap those wrists and tame the devils who may run you for a short period of time, and hopefully socially engineer our democracy to be more fair, more inclusive, more, let's say, justice shall we pursue. We'll never get there. That's a biblical quote. I did that for Reese's benefit, but justice shall ye
Will you
pursue.
Yeah,
It was in the film, wasn't it, somewhere?
I think so.
Yeah. It's like, so there's all this hidden stuff. This is age-old mensch-like behavior, saying, can't we be kinder to each other? Can't we allow things and open our minds up? But these artists had very little to lose because none of them were wealthy, right? All they had was their art. And
Jim, didn't most of them that were accused of being communists, did they never work again in Hollywood?
During the
From what
50s,
I remembered, they all were accused, and they never had another job. They had to go, I don't know, wash dishes or
well,
something.
those who refused to testify before the House on Un-American
Yeah.
Activities, who said, I take the fifth, or you have no business asking me this question, I'm not going to name names. They, yes, were blackballed for the rest of their lives. They had to write under fake names. Woody Allen did a very terrible comedy called not The Imposter, but where
Front.
he plays a beard for a blacklisted writer.
The front.
The front.
The front, yeah, he was the front for a blacklisted writer. And I think Zero Mostel was in that as well, tragically, in that film.
I have a friend whose father was one of the blacklisted writers. And he died at like almost 100 years old. And eventually he wrote under an assumed name for a long time. And eventually he did write.
Can you share his name with us?
Yeah, Walter Bernstein.
Oh, okay. I know, and I can't quote you his credits, but
yeah.
And even if you were called before the HUAC committee, if you were known to be communist, or if you'd ever been to a single meeting,
For Communist Party.
you didn't have to be a member of the Communist Party. They were spies. Walt Disney was an anti-communist and an anti-Semite, and hated that his very special animators, the guys who created Snow White, the first commercially successful animated film, really put them on the map. Half of them were Jews and liberal, and he didn't like it. And they tried to unionize, and he hated it when they were able to unionize. He was a stubborn Irishman who, keep your hands out of my business. Go work for somebody else. And now you can't. It's a very staunch union lot, and animation is still, fortunately, very unionized. But people outsource animation to India and Indonesia, where the labor is cheap and where the technical sophistication has improved greatly, because now it's so much of it is automated, or I should say automated, but is CGI, and it takes place in computers, where the average, it's easy to find people who would love to work in computer animation in Indonesia and India and Korea. They have big businesses. Fern, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, it is not uncommon for families to have very big differences, as well as they portrayed it in them.
Mhm.
My son's um, best friend is a Rockefeller
Mhm.
and very liberal, and as his some of his family. And then there was this guy in this movie who is his, I guess it's his grandfather,
Yeah.
great grandfather. I mean, it's weird, but it exists in families, this kind of different view of the world, and
Yeah.
life is complicated.
I had
Still
a difference
was.
like that with a brother of mine. Marina, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that it was horrible that people were persecuted for their beliefs here and were denied the right to work. But on the other side of the globe, if somebody had an idea not in line with the party line or with the government, or their neighbors suspected that they were not in line with the party line,
Yeah.
they were extinguished.
Right.
They and their families.
Right.
So it's a hardship, and it's totally horrible, but the scale is different.
Right, right. We saw that in East Germany, especially where at least one person in every apartment building was a spy for Russia, for the East German government. And so it's not just right-wing conservative governments that do it. It's left-wing radical governments that do it. And that's what gives liberals here in America a bad name among those who don't know better, in that all liberals are painted with the same brush. And it's not, I don't call Maduro's government a liberal government, or Oban's, a democracy. Trump has a new love affair with Oban, or Poland. These are democracies, but they're fragile, very fragile, and on the verge of dictatorship or authoritarianism. Brazil, who knows what's happening in Mexico? The outgoing president now wants all the judges to be elected. Well, you know who wins elections? They're purchased by the people with the most money to advertise, or who knows what else they do there. So there's something to be said for appointing judges, but of course, Trump appointed 300 judges out of 1,500 in the federal bench system, and has done a lot of damage, as we see in his own trial, where a judge he appointed, Aileen Cannon, she was asked to, by the way, recuse herself from the trial because she was a newly appointed judge. She never judged before. And other judges said, you shouldn't take this. You don't have the experience. And she did. And now there's a movement to have her removed by other legal scholars and other judges. So, it's like you have to keep the faith. These artists, these actors kept the faith because that was their lifeblood. That was their religion. Performing, entertaining people. To Bill Murray, it's only about making them laugh. And what was Orson Welles' point of view? We want to get our audience angry. We want them to go outside and complain and fuck. That's the dinner scene at the 21 Club, where they want to light fires under people and shake them out of whatever doldrums they're in, to shake them into life. And that's what the actors do. They manufacture life on stage. And that's what they're passionate about. Otherwise, how could they endure so much unemployment other than vanity? Emma Watson, really wasn't the best singer, but she had a lot of courage, And yeah, she wanted to be a performer, but she had the right stuff in the end. And another virtue of having these many characters is that they give us different people in which we can see ourselves. When a person speaks on screen, you identify with them up to a point. Sometimes you dismiss them out of hand, but you kind of really like built the two gay guys, Jack Black and the other guy. They're the people who said, "You think we're homosexual? I know. You think we're communists? That's a laugh. We're not red. We're pink. We're homosexuals." Very funny line, and they laugh about it too. So um, it's there is identification to be had with so many of those characters. It's a virtue for this film. It could be more clearly expressed, more slowly directed. Those scenes fly by, and if you miss a word, you lose the whole line, and maybe the purpose of the scene or what that character represents. But that's why he did it, I think. David, you have a comment?
Well, I have a question. Paul Giamatti, who is I think was not recognized enough for many years,
Yeah.
but in any event, what the heck was he doing in this movie? His singing was horrible. That was the only thing I remember of him in the
Okay.
movie, and also being treated like a waiter. I
Okay.
kind
That goes back to the relationship between Vanessa Redgrave and Peter Michael Hall, I think his name is.
of,
He's got three names. And that relationship is a lampoon of wealthy people who make kissy faces. And yet she's a total, you know, aesthete who really isn't, but just giddy with the delight at the goings on at the theater troupe. And he's making international deals and, giving satchels full of money to Mussolini's representative and buying expensive art or receiving it as gifts, and he's telling that fuck FDR, I'm not going to take his call, or I will, but I'm not going to go along. I'm not going to take the bait and join the other steel companies in agreeing to unionize. FDR wanted the steel companies, because they were very big employers, to unionize as a token, not a token, it was a big deal, of worker support. And workers needed support during the Depression. They got hurt where, people lost millions, still had homes and jewelry and other things. I talk about wealth disparity. The Golden Age produced a lot of wealth. That means the turn of the century barons, the what's the nickname for the
robber barons.
Robber barons.
robber barons, right? And that's what this guy represented. So they're not only lampooning Vanessa Redgrave, but the self-entitled robber barons of a prior age that still existed then. So there was plenty of money. And who was Paul Giamatti? He was her pet aesthete. He was like her court jester who made her feel, who supported her aesthetic pretensions. Yes, he sang badly. She couldn't hear it. Her husband goes to turn the radio on. She goes back and he turns it off, and she turns it back on, and he stalks off. But it's like it's spoofing these people who even when they're trying to side with artists, don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's a fashion, it's like she's in a different hat, a different outfit every scene, and it's a very funny wardrobe choices for her. But I thought totally spot on, and she jumps up and down like a little child, and it shows so much of what's wrong when you have so much money that there's no reason to be right about anything, just it's self-indulgence. So there's that too. It covered a lot of ground in terms of social stereotypes and archetypes. But remember, even among the poor, like John Turturro's family, they were born in Italy. He wasn't. He was an American born. So of course, the family's going to love fascist songs and not see them as that. And he's going to say, no, that's a fascist song, and I hate fascism. So it's like there are divides within families, Fern, like that. And they can be very serious. Where they come from? Well, that's different. People born in different countries, right? My division with my oldest brother was he was born during World War II, and I was born after World War II. And even though we're only 5 years apart, we were worlds apart in terms of what we owe each other as individuals. And he was not as generous as I, yet he was far wealthier than I will ever be. And he actually represented gas companies. He was a utilities lawyer at the top of the pecking order there. And, look, I was proud of his achievements. He was well respected and handled really big, gazillion-dollar cases and argued in state court in Chicago, in Illinois and Ohio all the time. But was he a happy man? No, he liked the posturing. He liked the adulation. but he really wanted to be an American Studies professor, and he never was. You know, and he missed his calling. He was one of the world's largest collectors of Boswell and Johnson first editions. He could afford it, but he was a scholar and he gave lectures, you know, as an adult lawyer his whole life, on and scholarly lectures about these two writers who were very important to the English language and to literature. Both conservatives, but you know, enlightened for the time, and that was his real passion, not the law, not utilities conflicts. So he indulged it, you know, as much as he could, as much as he had time for. He made time for it. He was constantly acquiring manuscripts, less so in his later years, but he was open to it. And he donated his collection, I think, to the University of Virginia, where he went to law school. And they have quite an archive. They have William Faulkner's manuscripts. And they even have a copy of Arthur Schick's original of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Arthur Schick, if you know me, is a great Jewish World War II artist who celebrated the American founding fathers, as did Virginia, but it's still a conservative leaning state. And even though the university is more enlightened, there's still remnants of it. So I'm so glad most of you liked it. I think it's a really great accomplishment. It made me ask, why hasn't Tim Robbins made more films? I think this is the only film he's directed.
Don't you think part of it is the fact that he is so left, and it's kind of this, he's your classic
lefty, right?
Lefty who doesn't brook any other
it's true. He had an acting company called the Actors Gang, and they had the old train station in Culver City in that triangular intersection of Culver and Washington Boulevard, near downtown Culver City. And they performed plays there in the lovely building. I don't know if they're still working, but you know, he was a great actor. I just rewatched The Shawshank Redemption, which I'm considering programming, which is a wonderful film with Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
About you have to be free in your mind. You know, it's not just the prison that keeps you trapped. It's your own sense of restriction. But I didn't feel that was as profound as this. Yes, Betty?
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the ending when the dummy was thrown
yes,
on
so
the
that's a
floor?
funeral. Now,
Yeah.
what did the dummy represent? You may not have caught it, but when they put him in
The Federal Theater?
yes, there's a sign, here lies somebody, the Federal Theater, born in 1931, died in 1933, died in 1936. So he represented the death of theater, the death of the arts. Remember, the dummy takes over from the master, from the puppet master, and shames him off the stage because he sings the Internationale.
Yeah.
And the spirit of freedom is within him, burns brighter within him than in Murray, although he does get the girl in the end. She shows up.
I wondered if it had to do with if he represented also communism, and that's why
No, because he was a theatrical tool, but he even the woodwork could take the right moral position. That dummy represents the right way to be. Now, Marina, or who was it who wanted to know about the last image? Well, the last image, they carry as the cast is celebrating their victorious performance. The funeral procession leaves the theater and walks alone at night. And the last shot is they walk into today's Times Square. So that is a projection of what this film represents to today's cultural and social and political life. Tim Robbins is pointing the finger at us. You have the same issues that we had in this movie today. They're very much alive. And it's a total surprise, very clever to switch from one historical context to another in the same shot. That's what makes it effective, because it's a seamless transition. It was easy to do because you just have the camera pointing down on the coffin and the people around him. And then as you pan up, as they go off into the crowd, you see it's Times Square. So it wasn't, it's clever. It was thoughtful, but it wasn't difficult to execute. Marina, your hand is still up.
Yes, I thought that what the funeral represented was they were thinking about instituting federal theater. That means that all the actors would be unionized, and when the union forbade them to perform, the only person who could perform was a non-unionized author, right? So the unionization meant the death of federal theater.
No, okay, I can see why you'd say that, but the federal theater was dead when the Dies Committee decided that there were too many communists in the arts.
And what they are showing now is that there is no government theater at all. All the theater is commercial.
Right.
So whether you call it federal theater or government theater, there may be some subsidies from the governments or grants, but basically every theater, every theatrical production is self-sustaining.
Yeah, well, is independent and has to find its own funding.
Yeah.
They're pretty careful about what they program at the Kennedy Center, which is a federal institution, because that's very public and they can't appear to take political sides. Betty?
Yeah, I just wondered when this movie was, when it came out.
1999, I think.
Yeah, it's 25 years old.
Oh, okay. So
it feels more contemporary than that, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So that is interesting.
Well, Tim Robbins is doing it and Susan Sarandon's in it, and they're not together anymore. So,
they made it past this film, but they've been separated for at least 10 years, I think. Yeah, so again, it's in a way it's timeless because we recognize ourselves in these characters, even the rich ones, even the ugly ones, even the corrupt ones. It's like this is humanity on display, and this is what happens when it gets out of control sometimes. Yes, he was very far left, but again, the skill, I was just so impressed with his storytelling skills here. I mean, he made more money as an actor, that's for sure. But I don't know. I didn't have the time to go look him up and see what he had done after this.
I don't know when I guess he did it way before Bull Durham. I guess it was before. It's great. Just totally great.
Right. Did he direct Bull Durham?
No, he acted in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that was Ron Shelton.
He and Susan Sarandon and Kevin Costner. It was great.
I did see it, but I don't remember it well.
Really good.
Okay, so what shall we do? Do you want to hold another discussion later this month? No? Yes? Maybe? You're open to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I may be unavailable on the 26th, but it doesn't matter. The discussion can continue.
Do you have another movie in mind?
Yeah, I have several in waiting. I'm waiting for the Mike Nichols movie, The Color of Money, Primary Colors, which is a wonderful film. I want to play that in October when we're closer to the election, because it really cuts to the notion of cutthroat political marketing of characters.
Great movie.
And a great movie, and another wonderful cast, and Mike Nichols is a great director. Now I just saw a movie that has no known, it's with Strand Releasing, which is a very obscure company. They do a lot of gay titles. and always have. But they're quite mavericks in the film world. I don't know if they earn a lot of money for their films, but they're survivors. They're 25 years old. This film is a Hong Kong film, all in Chinese. And more than half the players are gay. Gay women, couples. There's 6 of them. And it's all about when one of the women dies without a will signed, that her family wants to take the apartment she shared with her partner away from the surviving partner. And it's all about otherizing people. And it's not even mentioned that they're gay. It's accepted. And that's one of its accomplishments, because the way these people conduct themselves has nothing to do with sex. They may be together because they have a sexual relationship, but it's all about human feelings we can all identify with. So it's a real accomplishment in that world. It's also very compelling because it is Asian. It has this style of Asian understatement that I've talked about before, where they don't say much, but you understand everybody's motivation and their reaction. It's a film I can probably get if people would be willing to go to the Laemmle, the Royal, for a live performance. Could be a Sunday afternoon, could be a Thursday night. Monday night is the easiest time for me to get at the Laemmle Royal. And or I could get it to play in the Resnick campus theater, the chapel there. We could do that. And we might get a larger audience than we normally do. How do people feel about going to a live discussion and live screening? You do it on a Thursday night?
Obviously, I can't, but
No, it's not worth flying in for, but you can see it online.
oh,
No,
it's
you can't
on.
see this one. You can't see
Oh,
this one yet.
okay.
But I found it a really moving film because it was so insightful to people's motivations, whether you were the family that wanted to take the apartment from her, or her and her circle of gay friends, all women couples who
Going out again.
empathize with her. And we do too.
Jim, I mentioned to you the film Leonine,
Oh, yes, yes.
gorgeous film.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet, but I started. Leonie, yeah.
Leonine,
Yeah.
just a beautiful film.
It's directed by a Japanese director. And what's it about again, Fern?
It's about a Noguchi who,
Oh, yes, I did see it. Isamu Noguchi, who's a famous artist and furniture designer, you may know.
Yeah,
Some of you may
yeah.
have a coffee table. It's about his child, his mother. It's not about him, although it's his growing up years, but it's about his mother's independence and how she trained him to be nobody but himself. It's a beauty. I'm so glad you saw it, Fern, because I
it's
thought it
a
was beautiful.
beautiful film. It's poetic. It's
Okay,
interesting.
maybe we should do that, and that's available online at Amazon.
Yes, on Amazon, and you learn about Japan and what it's like to live there, and it's
Yeah.
about independence and mothers and sons and creative people, and it's a beautiful film.
Yeah, she champions an author, a poet who becomes a novelist, bestseller, and she's his editor. And they have a great marriage until they go back to Japan, and she realizes he has another wife. And Japanese people, even this progressive artist, right? This guy with an imagination, a free thinker, fused to the old ways of patrimony. You know, don't walk with me on the street. You have to walk behind me because I'm the man. And it's like his face is important to be saved in the community. And part of his dignity comes from his domination of the woman.
Quite a movie.
Really, really. And this woman won't take it. You know, she leaves him. And she's so brave and so outspoken, knows who she is, knows who her son is. It's a real great profile for, and I agree. So let's say we'll do that for the 26th.
What's it? Leone?
Leonie, Leonie.
Oh, Leonie.
And it is a real story, you know.
Yeah,
And the artwork, the boys' artwork.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
I'm going
I
to say
didn't
good night
know.
to everybody. I've got to go. Good night.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. This was very interesting.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, it is almost 9 o'clock. So great discussion. I'm happy to do it for 6 or 7 of us.
Yeah. Jim, I have something the night of the 26th. There's a good chance I'll be back in time, but if I'm not, will I be able to get on later if you've already
Yes,
started, if
yeah,
you're
Hannah,
like a half an hour into it or
yeah,
something?
yeah. Hannah will admit you, or I will admit you.
Okay,
when
so
I
there's
see
no
the
problem
name
with
come
that.
up.
Yeah.
And all these discussions are preserved online to be seen.
Okay.
Somebody called me and they said, "Hey, I found this discussion of you." I said, "What?" They had Googled me and found the archives at the Wilshire Boulevard Temple.
Oh.
So you too can see yourself on screen. And
I don't need to see myself on screen, but I
Right.
like the discussions.
Okay,
So,
good. Glad you do. So I'll see you all, I hope, on the 26th for Leone. Take care.
thank you.
Bye.